October 14th, 1943. The skies above Schweinfurt, Germany. Flight Lieutenant Hiroshi Tanaka of the Imperial Japanese Navy pressed his face against the observation window of the Heinkel He-111 transport aircraft, watching in stunned disbelief as American P-51 Mustang fighters tore through a formation of Messerschmitt Bf-109s like wolves through sheep. What he witnessed that day would shatter every assumption Japanese military leadership held about American fighter aircraft capabilities and trigger a crisis of confidence that would echo through Imperial Navy aviation circles for the remainder of the war. Tanaka had arrived in Germany 3 weeks earlier as part of a technical exchange mission between the Axis powers. The Japanese Navy desperately needed insight into German fighter tactics and aircraft designed to counter the growing American air superiority in the Pacific. Japanese Zero fighters, once the terror of Allied pilots, were being systematically destroyed by newer American aircraft with capabilities that seemed impossible according to Japanese intelligence assessments. The Luftwaffe had promised to demonstrate their latest fighters in action against American bomber formations. German pilots boasted that their Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s possessed superior performance characteristics compared to any American fighter. They spoke dismissively of American P-47 Thunderbolts as crude, heavy machines lacking the agility and climb rate necessary for effective air combat. They had heard rumors of a new American fighter called the Mustang, but intelligence reports suggested it was merely another mediocre design rushed into production by American factories that prioritized quantity over quality. These assumptions were about to be demolished in the most spectacular fashion possible. The second Schweinfurt raid would become known to Luftwaffe pilots as Black Thursday, but, for Tanaka, it represented something even more devastating, proof that American industrial might had achieved fighter aircraft superiority that Japanese technology simply could not match. The morning briefing at Luftwaffe headquarters near Frankfurt had been optimistic. Intelligence officers reported that 291 American B-17 Flying Fortress bombers were approaching German airspace, accompanied by fighter escorts that would be forced to turn back due to fuel limitations long before reaching the target. German fighter controllers had positioned 400 aircraft along the bomber route, including their newest and most capable pilots, flying aircraft equipped with the latest armament modifications specifically designed to destroy heavy bombers. Tanaka watched from his observation aircraft as the first wave of German fighters climbed to intercept altitude. Messerschmitt 109 G6 fighters, powered by 1,475 horsepower Daimler-Benz engines and armed with 20mm cannons, represented the pinnacle of German fighter development. These aircraft had dominated European skies for years, flown by pilots with hundreds of combat hours against British, Soviet, and American opponents. The initial attacks proceeded exactly as German tactical doctrine prescribed. Focke-Wulf 190s approached the bomber formations from head-on, their 4 20mm cannons and 2 13mm machine guns delivering devastating firepower that could destroy a B-17 with a single well-placed burst. Messerschmitt 109s attacked from above and behind, exploiting their superior climb rate and acceleration to engage bombers before their defensive gunners could respond effectively. For the first 30 minutes of combat, German tactics appeared successful. Tanaka watched through binoculars as American bombers fell from formation, trailing smoke and flame. The Luftwaffe pilots demonstrated exceptional skill and courage, pressing their attacks despite intense defensive fire from bomber gunners. Radio communications between German fighters crackled with excitement as pilots reported successful kills and prepared for follow-up attacks. Then everything changed. Long-range escort fighters appeared on the horizon, flying at altitudes and distances that should have been impossible for any American aircraft. These weren't the familiar P-47 Thunderbolts that German pilots knew and respected. Heavy fighters with excellent diving performance but limited range. These weren't the twin-engine P-38, T-28 Lightnings, that could be outmaneuvered by experienced German pilots in single-engine fighters. These were P-51 Mustangs, and they carried drop tanks that extended their combat radius to cover bombers all the way to targets deep inside Germany. More importantly, they possessed performance characteristics that made them superior to German fighters in nearly every measurable category. What Tanaka witnessed next would haunt Japanese military planners for the remainder of the war. The Mustangs dove into combat with energy and speed that German pilots had never encountered from American fighters. Their Packard-built Merlin engines, licensed from Rolls-Royce but manufactured with American precision and reliability, delivered 1,695 horsepower at altitude, providing performance that exceeded anything in the German arsenal. The laminar flow wing design gave them exceptional speed and range while maintaining the agility necessary for dogfighting. German pilots who had dominated air combat for years suddenly found themselves outclassed by aircraft they had dismissed as inferior American design. The Mustangs climbed faster than Messerschmitt 109s, dove faster than Focke-Wulf 190s, and turned inside both German aircraft types at combat altitudes. More devastating still, they possessed the fuel capacity to maintain combat performance. Throughout extended engagements while German fighters were forced to break off due to fuel limitations, Tanaka watched in growing horror as experienced German pilots, aces with dozens of confirmed victories, were systematically destroyed by American pilots flying aircraft that German intelligence had completely underestimated. The radio communications changed from excited combat reports to desperate calls for assistance, then to silence as one German fighter after another fell from the sky. The mathematical reality was becoming undeniable. American industry had not only achieved quantitative superiority in aircraft production, building fighters faster than Germany could destroy them, but had simultaneously achieved qualitative superiority by designing and manufacturing aircraft that outperformed their German counterparts in every critical performance category. The carnage unfolding below Tanaka's observation aircraft defied everything Japanese military doctrine had taught about American capabilities. Radio intercepts from German ground controllers painted a picture of systematic destruction that seemed impossible according to pre-war intelligence assessments. German fighter squadrons that had launched with full strength were reporting catastrophic losses within minutes of engaging the Mustang escorts. Oberst Wilhelm Balthasar, commanding officer of Jagdgeschwader 1, transmitted increasingly desperate situation reports as his experienced pilots fell victim to American fighters they couldn't outrun, outclimb, or outmaneuver. His voice, normally calm and professional even under extreme combat stress, carried undertones of disbelief that Tanaka recognized from his own experiences facing American aircraft in the Pacific. "These are not the same Americans we fought over France," Balthasar reported to Sector Command. "Their aircraft performance exceeds our intelligence estimates by significant margin. Mustang fighters are maintaining combat effectiveness at altitudes where our engines lose power. They're sustaining pursuit speeds that our aircraft cannot match even in emergency power settings." The technical implications were staggering. German fighter aircraft, designed by some of the world's most capable aeronautical engineers and manufactured using precision techniques that prioritized performance over mass production, were being systematically outclassed by American aircraft built using automotive industry principles that emphasized reliability and large-scale manufacturing. Tanaka had studied American industrial capacity during his assignment to the Japanese embassy in Washington before the war. He understood that American automobile manufacturers had converted their production lines to aircraft manufacturing, applying mass production techniques developed over decades of civilian vehicle manufacturing. Japanese military leaders had dismissed this approach as crude and unsophisticated, assuming that precision-built Japanese aircraft would maintain qualitative superiority despite numerical disadvantages. The aerial combat raging below demonstrated how completely wrong those assumptions had been. American industry hadn't simply converted automobile factories to aircraft production. They had revolutionized aircraft manufacturing by applying industrial principles that German and Japanese manufacturers had never mastered. The result was aircraft that combined superior performance characteristics with production rates that neither Axis power could approach. Major Hans Philipp, one of Germany's leading aces with 206 confirmed victories, broke radio silence with a transmission that sent shockwaves through Luftwaffe command structure. Mustang performance characteristics exceed all previous American fighters. These aircraft climb faster than 109s above 6,000 meters. They dive faster than 190s at all altitudes. They turn inside both our aircraft types in sustained combat. Philipp's assessment carried enormous weight within German aviation circles. He had flown against every Allied fighter type, including early-model Mustangs equipped with Allison engines that German pilots had found relatively easy to defeat. These new Merlin-powered variants represented a quantum leap in American fighter capability that German intelligence had completely failed to anticipate. The mathematics of aerial combat were being rewritten in real time as German pilots discovered that their tactical advantages had evaporated. German fighters traditionally relied on superior climb rate to engage from advantageous positions, diving attack capabilities to escape when outnumbered, and turning performance to outmaneuver heavier Allied fighters. The P-51B Mustangs engaging them possessed superior performance in all three categories while simultaneously carrying enough fuel to sustain combat operations throughout extended engagements. Tanaka focused his binoculars on individual dogfights, watching experienced German pilots employ every tactical technique in their repertoire against American opponents who seemed to anticipate and counter each maneuver. Messerschmitt 109 pilots attempted their traditional zoom climb attacks, only to discover that Mustangs could match their climb rate while carrying additional fuel and ammunition that should have imposed significant performance penalties. Focke-Wulf 190 pilots tried high-speed diving attacks that had proven effective against earlier American fighters, but found that Mustangs could follow them through the dive and continue accelerating beyond speeds that German aircraft could sustain. The laminar flow wing design that American engineers had developed provided exceptional high-speed performance while maintaining structural integrity under G-forces that would damage conventional wing designs. The aerial combat reached peak intensity when Hauptmann Egon Meyer, commanding officer of the 3rd JG-2 and developer of the head-on attack technique against American bombers, led his squadron in a coordinated assault against a formation of B-17s approaching the target area. Meyer had perfected tactics that maximized the firepower advantage of German fighters while minimizing exposure to defensive gunfire from bomber formations. His aircraft, a Focke-Wulf 190A6 equipped with 4 20mm cannons and 2 13mm machine guns, possessed firepower sufficient to destroy any American bomber with a single accurate burst. His pilots had trained extensively in the precise timing, an aircraft positioning required to deliver maximum destructive effect while avoiding collision with their targets. The attack began perfectly. German fighters approached the bomber formation in line-ahead formation, each pilot preparing to deliver a devastating burst of cannon fire into the cockpit and forward fuselage of their selected target. Meyer's squadron had executed this maneuver successfully dozens of times, destroying American bombers faster than their fighter escorts could respond. This time was different. P-51 Mustangs diving from high altitude intercepted the German attack formation before it could engage the bombers. The Mustangs' superior speed and energy retention allowed them to position themselves between the German fighters and their targets, forcing the Germans into a turning fight at exactly the wrong moment in their attack sequence. Meyer found himself engaged in individual combat with a Mustang pilot whose aircraft performance exceeded anything he had encountered in 3 years of combat against Allied fighters. The American pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Don Blakesley, commanding the 4th Fighter Group, flew his P-51B with precision and aggressiveness that matched the best German aces, while enjoying aircraft performance advantages that made the engagement fundamentally unequal. The dogfight lasted less than 3 minutes. Meyer, one of Germany's most experienced and successful fighter pilots, was shot down and killed by an American pilot flying an aircraft that German intelligence had dismissed as another mediocre American design. His death shocked the Luftwaffe pilot community and triggered urgent reassessments of American fighter capabilities throughout German military aviation circles. The systematic destruction of German fighter formations reached its horrifying climax. When Jagdgeschwader 26, one of the Luftwaffe's most elite units, encountered a squadron of P-51 Mustangs led by Major Francis Gabreski. What Tanaka witnessed through his binoculars that afternoon would become seared into his memory as the moment Japanese assumptions about American fighter pilot quality crumbled alongside their beliefs about American aircraft capabilities. JG-26 had launched with 48 aircraft, including their newest Focke-Wulf 190A8 fighters, equipped with additional armor protection and enhanced armament specifically designed to destroy American heavy bombers. The squadron included pilots with combat experience dating back to the Battle of Britain, men who had faced and defeated the Royal Air Force's best fighters during Germany's period of aerial supremacy. Major Klaus Mitusch, commanding the unit's TV 3rd Gruppe, led his pilots in a climbing attack toward a formation of B-17s approaching from the northwest. His tactical plan followed proven German doctrine: use superior climb rate to achieve altitude advantage, then execute high-speed diving attacks that maximized firepower delivery while minimizing exposure to defensive fire. The plan collapsed within seconds of initial contact with American fighters. Gabreski's Mustangs, maintaining combat air patrol positions above the bomber formations, dove to intercept the German attack with closing speeds that German pilots had never experienced from American aircraft. The P-51's Packard Merlin engines delivered maximum power at the exact altitudes where German engines began losing performance, giving American pilots decisive advantages in the vertical plane. Tanaka watched Mitusch's aircraft, easily identifiable by its distinctive yellow nose markings, engage a lone Mustang in what should have been a favorable matchup for the German pilot. Mitusch possessed over 400 combat hours and 72 confirmed victories against Allied aircraft. His Focke-Wulf 190A8, powered by a BMW 801D2 radial engine producing 1700 horsepower, represented the pinnacle of German fighter development. The engagement lasted exactly 97 seconds. Gabreski, flying P-51B serial number 42 6817, named Gabby, demonstrated aircraft handling and tactical awareness that exceeded anything Mitusch had encountered in 3 years of combat. The Mustang's superior power-to-weight ratio allowed sustained maneuvering that would have stalled or overstressed German aircraft, while its fuel capacity permitted aggressive tactics without concern for fuel consumption. More devastating than individual aircraft performance was the coordinated tactical employment that American fighter squadrons demonstrated. German pilots, trained in individualistic combat techniques that emphasized personal skill and aircraft performance, found themselves facing American tactical formations that maximized collective firepower while providing mutual support throughout extended engagement. The 4th Fighter Group's Finger 4 formation allowed Mustang pilots to maintain visual contact and mutual fire support while engaging multiple German aircraft simultaneously. When one American pilot maneuvered to attack a German fighter, his wingman automatically positioned to cover the attack and engage any German aircraft attempting to interfere. This tactical coordination, standard throughout American fighter units, created local numerical superiority, even when German formations outnumbered American fighters overall. Lieutenant Colonel Don Gentile, leading the 336th Fighter Squadron, demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of coordinated American tactics when his flight of 4 Mustangs engaged 12 Messerschmitt 109s attempting to attack the bomber formation from below. Rather than engaging in individual dogfights that would allow German numerical superiority to influence the outcome, Gentile's pilots maintained formation integrity while systematically destroying German aircraft through concentrated fire from multiple directions. The radio transmissions from German pilots revealed growing panic as they realized their tactical disadvantages extended far beyond aircraft performance. "These Americans fight like a machine," reported Oberleutnant Franz Stiegler, one of JG-26's most experienced pilots. "Every maneuver is coordinated. Every attack is supported. We cannot isolate individual aircraft for engagement." Tanaka recognized the tactical revolution he was witnessing. American fighter pilots weren't simply flying superior aircraft. They were employing tactical doctrines that maximized their technological advantages while exploiting weaknesses in German fighting techniques. The Americans had developed systematic approaches to air combat that treated individual pilot skill as just one component in a comprehensive tactical system. The destruction of Hauptmann Johannes Naumann's entire Staffel provided the most shocking demonstration of American tactical superiority. Naumann, a veteran pilot with 34 confirmed victories, led 9 Messerschmitt 109 G6 fighters in a carefully planned attack against B-17 formations approaching the target area. His pilots had studied American bomber defensive tactics and developed specific techniques to exploit gaps in crossfire coverage between aircraft in formation. The attack never materialized. Major James Goodson, commanding the 4th Fighter Group's 336th Squadron, positioned his Mustangs to intercept the German formation during its approach climb, engaging them at exactly the moment when German aircraft were most vulnerable. The Messerschmitts, configured for high-altitude interception with additional fuel and ammunition, couldn't maneuver effectively when forced into combat at medium altitude while carrying full combat loads. Goodson's 8 P-51 Mustangs destroyed all 9 German aircraft in less than 4 minutes of combat. The engagement demonstrated tactical coordination that German pilots had never encountered from American fighters, with each Mustang pilot executing predetermined roles in a systematic destruction of enemy aircraft that eliminated any possibility of effective German response. The radio silence from Naumann's Staffel sent shockwaves through German ground control stations monitoring the engagement. 9 experienced German pilots and their aircraft, representing months of training and irreplaceable combat experience, had been eliminated by American pilots whose tactical competence matched their technological advantages. For Tanaka, watching from his observation aircraft, the implications were terrifying. If American fighter pilots could systematically destroy elite German units using superior tactics and aircraft performance, what hope did Japanese pilots have? Against the same opponents, Japanese fighter aircraft, designed for different tactical requirements and combat conditions, possessed even greater performance disadvantages compared to American fighters than German aircraft demonstrated. The aerial combat continued throughout the afternoon, but the outcome had become inevitable within the first hour of engagement. German fighter units that had dominated European skies for years were being systematically destroyed by American opponents whose capabilities exceeded every intelligence estimate and tactical assumption. The statistical reality of what Tanaka was witnessing became undeniably clear as German ground controllers began receiving loss reports from surviving pilots. By 1400 hours, Luftwaffe units had lost 38 fighters, with an additional 20 damaged beyond immediate repair capability. American losses stood at exactly 4 P-51 Mustangs destroyed and 2 damaged but recoverable. The exchange ratio was so catastrophically one-sided that German commanders initially refused to believe the reports. General Major Adolf Galland, general of fighters for the Luftwaffe, received the preliminary battle damage assessment at his headquarters near Berlin. The numbers told a story that contradicted everything German aviation leadership believed about their tactical and technological capabilities. Elite fighter units with years of combat experience and aircraft representing the pinnacle of German aeronautical engineering had been systematically destroyed by American opponents they had consistently underestimated. "These loss rates are unsustainable," Galland transmitted to his subordinate commanders. "If American fighter performance has improved to these levels, our current tactical doctrines require immediate revision. We cannot continue engaging enemy escorts under these conditions without destroying our remaining experienced pilot cadre." Tanaka understood the implications better than most German officers. Japanese naval aviation had faced similar tactical revelations when engaging American fighters over the Solomon Islands. The gradual but inexorable improvement in American aircraft performance, pilot training, and tactical coordination had systematically eroded Japanese advantages until even the most experienced pilots found themselves outmatched by opponents flying superior equipment. The difference was that German pilots were experiencing in a single afternoon what had taken Japanese aviation months to recognize. American industrial capacity had achieved not gradual improvement, but revolutionary advancement in fighter aircraft capabilities. The P-51 Mustang represented a quantum leap in performance that rendered previous tactical assumptions obsolete. Major Heinz Baer, one of Germany's leading aces with 220 confirmed victories, transmitted a situation report that captured the desperation spreading through German fighter units. American Mustang performance exceeds all previous intelligence estimates. These aircraft possess superior speed, climb rate, and maneuverability at all altitudes. Our pilots are being systematically outclassed by opponents flying aircraft we cannot match. Baer's assessment carried enormous weight within Luftwaffe circles. He had flown against every Allied fighter type on both Eastern and Western fronts, accumulating combat experience that few pilots survived to achieve. His conclusion that German aircraft were fundamentally outmatched represented an admission that German aviation leadership had been reluctant to face. The technological revolution that American industry had achieved became clear as Tanaka observed individual dogfights through high-powered binoculars. The Packard Merlin engine that powered the P-51B and P-51D variants delivered performance characteristics that German engines simply could not match. At 25,000 feet altitude, where most air combat occurred, the Merlin produced maximum power while German engines suffered significant performance degradation. More importantly, American manufacturing quality had achieved consistency that German precision manufacturing could not match during wartime conditions. Every P-51 Mustang performed to identical specifications with interchangeable parts and standardized performance characteristics. German aircraft, despite superior theoretical engineering, suffered from manufacturing variations and quality control, problems that resulted in significant performance differences between individual aircraft. Captain Charles "Chuck" Yeager, flying his P-51D named Glamorous Glenn III, demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of American pilot training combined with superior aircraft performance. Yeager engaged 3 Messerschmitt 109s simultaneously, using energy management techniques that maximized his aircraft's advantages while exploiting German tactical limitations. The engagement lasted 6 minutes. Yeager destroyed 2 German aircraft and damaged the third so severely that it crash-landed behind German lines. His ammunition expenditure totaled 847 rounds of 50 caliber machine gun ammunition, demonstrating the precise gunnery training that American pilots received before entering combat. German pilots, by contrast, often entered combat with minimal gunnery training due to fuel shortages and aircraft availability limitations. They relied heavily on combat experience to develop shooting skills that American pilots acquired through systematic training programs before their first combat missions. The training differential became apparent as Tanaka watched American pilots demonstrate consistent accuracy and tactical decision-making throughout extended combat engagements. Lieutenant Urban Ben Drew, flying P-51D serial number 44-14888, shot down 2 Focke-Wulf 190s and 1 Messerschmitt 109 during a single engagement, executing textbook attack patterns that maximized his aircraft's performance advantages. Drew's success wasn't exceptional among American pilots that day. The 4th Fighter Group recorded 15 confirmed victories with 3 probable and 4 damaged German aircraft. The 352nd Fighter Group claimed 12 confirmed victories. The 56th Fighter Group, flying P-47 Thunderbolts rather than P-51 Mustangs, still managed 8 confirmed victories against German fighters. The cumulative destruction reached levels that German aviation units had never experienced in single-day combat operations. Jagdgeschwader 1 lost 23 aircraft, with 18 pilots killed or missing. Jagdgeschwader 11 reported 19 aircraft destroyed, with 14 pilot casualties. Jagdgeschwader 26 suffered 16 aircraft, lost with 12 pilots killed. These were not training units or inexperienced squadrons. These were elite German fighter units, with pilots averaging over 300 combat hours, and aircraft representing the most advanced German aviation technology. Their systematic destruction by American opponents demonstrated technological and tactical superiority that German military leadership could no longer ignore or explain away. For Tanaka, the most shocking aspect wasn't the individual aircraft performance or pilot skill levels. It was the industrial implications of what he was witnessing. American factories were producing P-51 Mustangs at rates exceeding 500 aircraft per month, while maintaining quality standards that resulted in superior performance compared to hand-built German aircraft. The North American Aviation Plant in Inglewood, California, employed 91,000 workers producing Mustangs using assembly line techniques borrowed from automobile manufacturing. The plant operated 3 shifts, 7 days per week, delivering completed aircraft faster than German factories could produce major components for their fighters. This industrial capacity meant that American losses, regardless of exchange ratios, could be replaced faster than German victories could eliminate them, even if German pilots achieved favorable kill ratios, which they clearly were not doing this. American production capacity would eventually overwhelm German fighter defenses through sheer numerical superiority combined with technological advancement. The industrial mathematics that terrified Tanaka became brutally clear as he calculated the implications of American production capacity versus German combat losses. Intelligence reports indicated that American factories delivered approximately 15,000 fighter aircraft annually, while German production struggled to replace. Combat losses that were accelerating as Allied bombing intensified. The aerial combat raging below represented not just tactical defeat, but industrial annihilation of German air power. Lieutenant Colonel James Howard, commanding the 354th Fighter Group, demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of American long-range escort capabilities when his P-51 Mustangs engaged a formation of twin-engine Messerschmitt 110 destroyers attempting to attack B-17 bombers with air-to-air rockets. The Me-110s, heavily armed with 30mm cannons and specialized rocket launchers, had proven effective against unescorted bomber formations, but were helpless against single-engine fighters with superior performance. Howard's attack destroyed 6 Me-110s in less than 3 minutes, eliminating an entire squadron of specialized bomber destroyers that had required months to train and equip. The German pilots, experienced in engaging heavy bombers but unprepared for combat against escort fighters, were systematically destroyed before they could employ their heavy armament against their intended targets. The destruction of Germany's twin-engine fighter force represented strategic catastrophe beyond the immediate tactical implications. German aircraft manufacturers had invested enormous resources developing specialized bomber-destroyer variants equipped with heavy cannons and rocket systems, specifically designed to defeat American bomber formations. These aircraft were effective only when attacking unescorted bombers, becoming liability when forced to engage single-engine fighters. American long-range escort capability had rendered Germany's entire strategic air defense concept obsolete. The Luftwaffe had based their defensive planning on the assumption that American fighters lacked the range to escort bombers to targets deep inside Germany. This assumption had been correct until the P-51 Mustang entered service with drop tanks that extended its combat radius to cover bombing missions throughout German-occupied Europe. Major Georg Peter Eder, commanding the Saturn II J-26, transmitted increasingly desperate situation reports as his unit suffered catastrophic losses to American escort fighters. Enemy fighter performance characteristics exceed all previous intelligence estimates. Mustang aircraft maintain combat effectiveness throughout extended engagements, while our aircraft are forced to break off due to fuel limitations. Ader's assessment highlighted a critical American advantage that German engineers had failed to anticipate. The P-51's exceptional fuel efficiency, combined with its aerodynamically clean design, allowed sustained combat operations at ranges that German fighters simply could not match. German aircraft, designed for short-range interception, lacked the fuel capacity for extended combat at the distances required to engage American bomber formations. Tanaka watched through his binoculars as Captain Don Gentile, already an ace with 21 confirmed victories, engaged a formation of Focke-Wulf 190s, attempting to break through American escort coverage. Gentile's P-51D, equipped with 85-gallon drop tanks that extended its range to 1,750 miles, possessed fuel reserves that allowed aggressive maneuvering throughout the engagement, while German aircraft were forced to conserve fuel for the return flight to their bases. The engagement demonstrated tactical flexibility that German pilots could not match. Gentile maintained high-speed pursuit of German aircraft attempting to disengage, forcing them into continued combat when their fuel situation demanded immediate withdrawal. His aircraft's superior range allowed him to sustain pressure on German formations regardless of their tactical decisions. 3 Focke-Wulf 190s fell to Gentile's guns during an engagement that lasted 12 minutes, an eternity in air combat terms. German pilots, flying aircraft with limited fuel capacity and engines that consumed fuel at rates exceeding American fighters, were forced to disengage, while American pilots maintained offensive pressure throughout extended combat sequences. The fuel differential represented more than tactical convenience. It embodied fundamental differences in American versus German engineering philosophy. American aircraft designers prioritized operational flexibility and sustained performance over maximum theoretical capabilities. German designers optimized for peak performance characteristics that looked impressive in specifications, but couldn't be maintained during actual combat. Operations: Captain Raymond Wetmore, flying P-51D, serial number 44-11622, named Daddy's Girl, demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of American pilot training and aircraft. Reliability during an engagement with 4 Messerschmitt 109s. Wetmore had accumulated only 78 combat hours, far less experience than his German opponents, but his systematic training and superior aircraft allowed him to engage multiple opponents simultaneously. The engagement showcased American training methodology that emphasized standardized tactics and coordinated team fighting over individual skill development. Wetmore maintained radio contact with his wingman throughout the engagement, receiving tactical updates and fire support that allowed him to engage superior numbers without being overwhelmed. German pilots, trained in individualistic combat techniques that emphasized personal skill and aircraft handling, found themselves isolated during multi-aircraft engagements. Their radio discipline and tactical coordination couldn't match American standards that treated air combat as systematic team activity rather than individual dueling. Wetmore shot down 2 Messerschmitt 109s and damaged a third during the engagement, expending 1,247 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition with hit probability exceeding 15%. His gunnery accuracy reflected training programs that American pilots completed before entering combat, practicing against realistic targets with unlimited ammunition supplies. German pilots received minimal gunnery training due to fuel shortages and ammunition conservation requirements. They developed shooting skills through combat experience if they survived long enough to accumulate the necessary experience. This training differential showed in combat effectiveness, measurements that favored American pilots. Even when flying equivalent aircraft, the systematic destruction of German fighter formations continued throughout the afternoon as American bomber streams approached their targets with escort coverage. that German interceptors could not penetrate. Luftwaffe ground controllers reported increasing desperation as their carefully planned defensive operations collapsed under pressure from American fighters whose capabilities exceeded every tactical assumption. Oberst Johannes Steinhoff, commanding Jagdgeschwader 77, transmitted the assessment that German aviation leadership had been reluctant to acknowledge. American fighter aircraft performance has achieved levels that our current tactics cannot counter. We require immediate strategic revision of our defensive concepts or face systematic destruction of our remaining pilot strength. Steinhoff's warning proved prophetic as German losses mounted throughout the engagement. By 1500 hours, Luftwaffe units had lost 63 fighters, with an additional 31 damaged beyond immediate repair. American losses remained at 6 P-51 Mustangs destroyed, creating exchange ratios that German air power could not sustain. The psychological impact on surviving German pilots became evident as radio transmissions shifted from tactical coordination to expressions of disbelief and demoralization. Hauptmann Walter Krupinski, a veteran ace with 197 confirmed victories, transmitted a situation report that captured the crisis of confidence spreading through German fighter units. These American pilots fight with precision and coordination we have never encountered. None. Their aircraft performance advantages are overwhelming our most experienced pilots. Krupinski's assessment carried devastating implications for German air defense strategy. If pilots with hundreds of combat hours and extensive experience against Allied aircraft were being systematically outclassed, what hope remained for less experienced pilots flying inferior aircraft? The Luftwaffe's training pipeline, already severely constrained by fuel shortages and aircraft availability, could not produce pilots capable of matching American capabilities under current conditions. Tanaka observed Major Robert Johnson, commanding the 56th Fighter Group's 61st Squadron, demonstrate tactical leadership that exemplified American fighter doctrine evolution. Johnson coordinated simultaneous attacks by 16 P-51 Mustangs against a German formation, attempting to penetrate bomber escort coverage through numerical superiority. Rather than engaging in individual dogfights that would allow German pilots to exploit their experience advantages, Johnson's pilots maintained formation integrity while systematically isolating and destroying German aircraft. The tactical coordination displayed by American fighter pilots reflected training methodologies that German aviation never fully developed. American pilots practiced formation flying, radio discipline, and coordinated attack patterns using standardized procedures that maximized collective effectiveness. German pilots, despite superior individual skills in many cases, lacked the systematic team-fighting capabilities that American training programs emphasized. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabreski, leading the 56th Fighter Group, shot down his 31st confirmed victim during an engagement that lasted less than 2 minutes. His target, Oberleutnant Heinrich Bartels of JG-27, was himself an experienced pilot with 99 confirmed victories against Allied aircraft. The engagement demonstrated how American aircraft performance advantages could overcome even significant experience differentials when combined with superior tactics. Bartels, flying a Messerschmitt 109 G-14 with enhanced high-altitude performance, modifications should have possessed tactical advantages in vertical maneuvering against the heavier American fighter. His extensive combat experience included successful engagements against earlier American fighter types, giving him detailed knowledge of American tactical tendencies and aircraft limitations. The engagement began when Bartels attempted a climbing attack against Gabreski's P-51D, using superior initial climb rate to achieve firing position before the American pilot could respond. The tactic had proven successful against P-40 Warhawks and early-model P-51A Mustangs, equipped with Allison engines that lost power rapidly at high altitude. Gabreski's P-51D, powered by the Packard Merlin V1650-7 engine, maintained full power output at altitudes where German engines began losing performance. The Merlin's two-stage supercharger system delivered maximum power at exactly the altitudes where most air combat occurred, giving American pilots decisive advantages in vertical plane maneuvering. The engagement reversed within seconds as Gabreski's P-51 aircraft matched Bartel's climb rate, while carrying additional fuel and ammunition that should have imposed significant performance penalties. The American pilot then demonstrated energy management techniques that maximized his aircraft's power-to-weight advantages, while exploiting limitations in German aircraft design. Bartels found himself in the unprecedented situation of being outclimbed by an American fighter while flying his aircraft at maximum performance settings. His tactical options disappeared as Gabreski maintained pursuit through maneuvers that would have stalled earlier American fighters or forced them to break off due to engine limitations. The killing burst came during a high-speed dive when Bartels attempted to use his aircraft's diving performance to escape engagement. The P-51D's laminar flow wing design provided exceptional high-speed characteristics that allowed Gabreski to maintain pursuit through dive angles and speeds that would have damaged conventional aircraft structures. Bartel's aircraft disintegrated under 50 caliber machine gun fire at approximately 450 miles per hour indicated airspeed, demonstrating the devastating effectiveness of American weapon systems when delivered by pilots flying aircraft with superior performance characteristics. His death eliminated another experienced German pilot whose replacement would lack the combat experience necessary to survive against American opponents. The systematic destruction of Germany's experienced pilot cadre represented strategic catastrophe beyond immediate tactical implications. German flight training programs, severely constrained by fuel shortages and aircraft availability, required 18 months to produce pilots with basic combat readiness. American training programs delivered combat-ready pilots in 12 months, while providing substantially more flight time and gunnery practice. Captain Urban Drew, flying P-51D named Detroit Miss, demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of American weapons technology when he engaged a formation of Messerschmitt Tu-62 jet fighters attempting to attack bomber formations using high-speed hit-and-run tactics. The Me-262s, representing Germany's most advanced aviation technology, possessed speed advantages that should have allowed them to engage and disengage at will. Drew's engagement with the jets revealed how American tactical development had evolved to counter even Germany's most advanced aircraft. Rather than attempting to match the jets' speed advantages, Drew positioned his aircraft to intercept them during their attack approach when they were committed to specific flight paths and vulnerable to interception. The jet fighters, despite their technological sophistication, suffered from operational limitations that American pilots had learned to exploit. Their engines required careful throttle management to prevent flameouts, limiting their maneuverability during critical phases of combat. Their high fuel consumption restricted their combat time to minutes rather than the hours that conventional fighters could sustain. Drew shot down 2 Me-262s during an engagement that lasted 4 minutes, destroying aircraft that represented hundreds of hours of specialized manufacturing and irreplaceable turbine engine technology. His success demonstrated how superior tactics and pilot training could overcome even significant technological advantages when applied systematically. The destruction of Germany's jet fighters highlighted American industrial advantages that extended beyond aircraft performance to include tactical development and pilot training. American aviation units had developed specific procedures for engaging jet aircraft based on systematic analysis of their operational characteristics and limitations. German jet pilots, despite flying technologically superior aircraft, lacked the tactical doctrine and training necessary to maximize their advantages while minimizing their vulnerabilities. They were essentially test pilots flying experimental aircraft in combat rather than operational pilots employing proven tactical systems. The industrial implications of American fighter superiority became devastatingly clear as Tanaka calculated the replacement rates required to sustain German air defense operations. Intelligence reports indicated that American factories delivered completed P-51 Mustangs at rates exceeding 17 aircraft per day, while German fighter production struggled to replace daily combat losses that were accelerating as pilot experience levels declined and manufacturing quality deteriorated under bombing pressure. Major Gerhard Barkhorn, Germany's second-highest scoring ace, with 301 confirmed victories, transmitted a tactical assessment that captured the hopelessness spreading through Luftwaffe fighter units. American fighter capabilities have reached levels that render our defensive tactics obsolete. We cannot achieve favorable exchange ratios against opponents flying aircraft with superior performance in every measurable category. Barkhorn's evaluation carried enormous weight within German aviation circles. His combat experience spanned 4 years of continuous operations against Soviet, British, and American opponents across multiple theaters. His conclusion that German fighters were fundamentally outmatched represented professional assessment based on direct comparison of aircraft capabilities under actual combat conditions. The technological revolution that American industry had achieved extended beyond engine performance to encompass systematic improvements in every aircraft system. The P-51D's K-14 gyroscopic gun sight automatically calculated lead angles and bullet drop compensation, allowing pilots to achieve accurate fire against maneuvering targets without the complex mental calculations required by German pilots using conventional ring and bead sights. Lieutenant Colonel John Meyer, commanding the 352nd Fighter Group, demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of advanced American weapons systems when he engaged 6 Focke-Wulf 190s attempting to attack B-17 formations from below. Meyer's P-51D, equipped with 6 Saturdentfand 50 caliber machine guns synchronized through the propeller arc, delivered concentrated firepower that could destroy German fighters with brief, accurate bursts. The engagement showcased American weapons technology that German engineers had attempted to match but never equaled. T-Tikin 50 caliber Browning machine gun, perfected through decades of development and manufactured to tolerances that German industry could not achieve during wartime conditions, provided reliability and accuracy that exceeded comparable German weapons systems. Meyer's guns functioned flawlessly throughout an engagement that consumed 1,334 rounds of ammunition, while destroying 3 German aircraft and damaging 2 others beyond repair capability. His weapons required no adjustment or maintenance between combat sequences, demonstrating reliability that German pilots could not expect from their temperamental 20mm cannons that frequently jammed during critical combat moments. German aircraft armament, despite superior theoretical firepower, suffered from reliability problems that reduced combat effectiveness under actual operational conditions. The MG-151 Tor-20 cannon, standard armament on most German fighters, required precise maintenance and high-quality ammunition to function reliably. Wartime production shortcuts and material shortages resulted in frequent malfunctions that left German pilots defenseless during critical combat phases. Captain Chuck Yeager, flying his 3rd combat mission in P-51D, Glamorous Glen 3rd, engaged. Hauptmann Franz Stigler, a veteran pilot with 167 confirmed victories and extensive experience against American bomber formations. The engagement would demonstrate how American technological advantages could overcome even significant experience differentials when supported by superior training and tactics. Stigler, flying a Messerschmitt 109 G10 with enhanced high-altitude performance, possessed detailed knowledge of American fighter characteristics based on previous combat encounters. He had developed personal tactics specifically designed to exploit perceived weaknesses in American fighter designs and pilot training methodologies. The engagement began when Stigler executed a climbing spiral attack designed to force the American pilot into a turning fight, where German aircraft traditionally held advantages due to superior power-to-weight ratios. His tactic had proven successful against earlier American fighters, whose engines lost power rapidly during sustained high-altitude maneuvering. Yeager's response demonstrated tactical training that German pilots had never encountered from American opponents. Rather than accepting the turning engagement that Stigler intended, Yeager used his aircraft's superior energy retention to extend the fight vertically, forcing combat into the altitude regime where his Packard Merlin engine delivered maximum performance advantages. The Merlin's two-stage, two-speed supercharger maintained full power output at 25,000 feet, where Stigler's DB605 engine had lost nearly 30% of its sea-level power rating. This performance differential allowed Yeager to maintain aggressive maneuvering while Stigler was forced to manage his engine carefully to prevent power loss that would leave him vulnerable to attack. The engagement lasted 8 minutes, an extended dogfight that tested both pilots' skills and aircraft capabilities under sustained combat stress. Yeager's ammunition management reflected training that emphasized careful trigger discipline and accurate gunnery over volume of fire. He fired 847 rounds during the engagement, achieving hit probability exceeding 18% against a maneuvering target. Stigler's aircraft sustained critical damage to its cooling system during the final phase of combat, forcing him to disengage while his engine temperature reached dangerous levels. His Messerschmitt 109, despite being flown by one of Germany's most experienced pilots, had been systematically outmaneuvered by an American pilot with less than 50 combat hours flying an aircraft with superior performance characteristics. The psychological impact on German pilots became evident as radio transmissions revealed growing demoralization among survivors of the day's combat. Oberleutnant Walter Schuck, formerly confident in his abilities in aircraft, transmitted a situation report that captured the crisis. American fighter pilot training has achieved standards we cannot match. Their systematic tactics and superior aircraft create combat situations we cannot successfully counter. Schuck's assessment reflected observations that German aviation leadership found increasingly difficult to ignore. American pilots demonstrated consistent tactical competence that suggested systematic training programs far superior to anything German aviation had developed. Their formation discipline, radio procedures, and coordinated attack patterns indicated institutional development that German improvised training could not replicate. The training differential became apparent as American fighter pilots executed complex tactical maneuvers with precision that German pilots achieved only after extensive combat experience. American replacement pilots arrived in combat units with standardized skills that allowed immediate integration into existing tactical systems. German replacement pilots required months of additional training to reach combat effectiveness levels that often proved inadequate against American opponents. Major Walt Beckham, leading the 353rd Fighter Squadron, coordinated simultaneous attacks by 12 P-51 Mustangs against a German formation that outnumbered his unit by nearly 2-to-1. Rather than avoiding engagement due to numerical disadvantage, Beckham employed tactical doctrine that maximized American technological advantages while exploiting German coordination limitations. The tactical coordination demonstrated by Beckham's squadron revealed the systematic development of American fighter doctrine that German aviation had never achieved, despite years of combat experience. Each P-51 pilot executed predetermined roles in coordinated attack patterns that eliminated German numerical advantages through superior organization and mutual support. The Americans fought as a unified tactical system rather than individual pilots sharing the same airspace. Hauptmann Erich Hartmann, Germany's highest-scoring ace with 352 confirmed victories, observed the engagement from high altitude while leading his own formation toward the bomber stream. Even Hartmann, whose combat record exceeded any pilot in aviation history, recognized tactical sophistication in American fighter operations that German units had never developed consistently. The Americans have evolved beyond individual pilot skill. Hartmann transmitted to his squadron, "They fight with systematic precision that maximizes their technological advantages. We must adapt our tactics immediately, or face systematic destruction by opponents whose capabilities exceed our current countermeasures." Hartmann's assessment carried unprecedented weight within German fighter circles. His combat experience included successful engagements against every Allied fighter type, accumulating tactical knowledge that few pilots survived to achieve. His conclusion that German tactics required fundamental revision represented acknowledgement that American capabilities had reached levels German aviation could not match using existing methods. The engagement unfolding below demonstrated how American tactical development had systematically addressed every aspect of air combat through scientific analysis and standardized training. Beckham's pilots maintained perfect formation discipline, while executing attack patterns that concentrated firepower against individual German aircraft while providing mutual protection against counterattack. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, flying P-51D serial number 44-13926, engaged Oberleutnant Günther Rall, an ace with 275 confirmed victories and extensive experience against American fighters. The individual duel represented a microcosm of the broader technological and tactical advantages that American aviation had achieved through systematic industrial and training development. Rall, flying a Messerschmitt 109K4 with enhanced performance modifications, possessed combat experience that should have provided decisive advantages against a relatively inexperienced American pilot. His aircraft represented the pinnacle of German fighter development, incorporating aerodynamic refinements and engine improvements that delivered the best performance German industry could achieve. The engagement began when Rall attempted a high-speed climbing attack that had proven successful against earlier American fighters. His tactic relied on superior initial acceleration and climb rate to achieve firing position before American pilots could respond effectively. The maneuver required precise timing and aircraft handling that few pilots could execute successfully. Johnson's response demonstrated training that German pilots received only through extensive combat experience, if they survived long enough to develop such skills. Rather than attempting to match Rall's climb rate, Johnson used energy management techniques that maximized his aircraft's sustained performance advantages while exploiting limitations in German tactical doctrine. The P-51D's superior power-to-weight ratio at combat altitude allowed Johnson to maintain pursuit through vertical maneuvers that would have forced earlier American fighters to disengage. His aircraft's fuel efficiency permitted aggressive maneuvering throughout extended combat, without concern for fuel consumption that constrained German tactical options. Rall found himself in the unprecedented situation of being outclimbed and outmaneuvered by an American pilot with less than one-tenth his combat experience. The engagement reversed within minutes as Johnson's systematic training and superior aircraft performance overcame even Rall's exceptional individual skills and tactical knowledge. The killing sequence demonstrated American weapons technology that German industry had attempted to match but never equaled. Johnson's .650 caliber machine guns, synchronized through advanced harmonization techniques, delivered concentrated firepower that destroyed Rall's aircraft with a single accurate burst, totaling 234 rounds. Rall's death eliminated another irreplaceable German pilot whose combat experience represented institutional knowledge that German training programs could not reproduce. His replacement would require months of training to achieve basic combat competence while facing American opponents whose systematic preparation provided immediate tactical effectiveness. The systematic destruction of Germany's experienced pilot cadre accelerated as American fighter capabilities reached levels that German aviation could not counter using existing aircraft and tactics. Major Adolf Galland Jr., son of the General of Fighters and himself an experienced combat pilot, transmitted situation reports that captured the desperation spreading through German fighter units. "Our aircraft are obsolete against American fighters," Galland reported. "Their performance advantages in speed, climb rate, and maneuverability are decisive at all altitudes. More critically, their pilot training produces consistent tactical competence that our improvised programs cannot match." Galland's assessment highlighted fundamental differences between American and German aviation development that extended beyond individual aircraft capabilities. American fighter aviation had become an integrated system encompassing advanced aircraft, systematic pilot training, standardized tactics, and reliable logistics support that maintained consistent operational effectiveness. German fighter aviation remained dependent on individual pilot skill and aircraft performance, without the systematic integration that maximized collective capabilities. German pilots, regardless of personal competence, operated within organizational structures that could not exploit their individual abilities effectively against American tactical systems. Captain Donald Gentile, already credited with 21 aerial victories, demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of American pilot development programs when he engaged 4 Focke-Wulf 190s simultaneously. Rather than avoiding combat against superior numbers, Gentile employed tactical doctrine that treated numerical disadvantage as acceptable when supported by superior aircraft performance and systematic training. The engagement showcased American tactical philosophy that emphasized aggressive offensive action supported by technological advantages. Gentile maintained attack posture throughout the engagement, forcing German pilots into defensive reaction that prevented coordinated counterattack while exposing them to systematic destruction. His aircraft's superior fuel capacity allowed sustained combat maneuvering that German aircraft could not match without risking fuel exhaustion during the return flight to base. This operational advantage permitted American pilots to maintain offensive pressure throughout extended engagements, while German pilots were forced to disengage regardless of tactical situation. Gentile destroyed 3 of the 4 German aircraft during an engagement that consumed 1,356 rounds of ammunition, while demonstrating gunnery accuracy that reflected systematic training rather than combat-learned skills. His success rate exceeded German pilot averages even when German pilots possessed significantly more combat experience and flying time. The engagement demonstrated how American industrial and training advantages had created compound effects that multiplied individual technological improvements into systematic superiority across all aspects of fighter operations. American pilots flew better aircraft, employed superior tactics, and possessed training that maximized their technological advantages while exploiting German limitations. The final phase of the aerial engagement revealed the complete collapse of German air defense strategy, as surviving Luftwaffe pilots transmitted increasingly desperate requests for permission to disengage from combat. They could not win. Oberkommando. Der Luftwaffe controllers, monitoring radio communications from their underground bunkers, faced the brutal reality that their carefully planned defensive operations had disintegrated under pressure from American fighter capabilities that exceeded every tactical assumption. Major Heinz Baer, commanding 3JG-1 with 220 confirmed victories spanning 4 years of continuous combat, transmitted the assessment that German aviation leadership had been desperately avoiding. American fighter superiority is absolute. Our pilots cannot achieve favorable exchange ratios regardless of tactical approach or numerical advantage. Continued engagement under current conditions will result in complete destruction of remaining experienced personnel. Baer's professional evaluation represented the definitive acknowledgement that German fighter aviation had been systematically defeated by American opponents whose technological and tactical advantages rendered German resistance futile. His recommendation to avoid further combat with American escort fighters would become unofficial Luftwaffe policy for the remainder of the war, as surviving German units husbanded their limited resources for missions where they possessed some possibility of success. Lieutenant Colonel Don Blakesley, commanding the 4th Fighter Group, demonstrated the strategic implications of American fighter superiority when his P-51 Mustangs pursued retreating German formations to their home airfields, conducting ground attack missions that destroyed aircraft and infrastructure that survived the aerial combat. This capability to extend operations beyond air-to-air combat represented another dimension of American tactical flexibility that German forces could not match. The ground attack phase revealed additional American advantages that German intelligence had underestimated. P-51 Mustangs, designed primarily for air superiority missions, possessed ground attack capabilities that allowed effective engagement of airfield facilities, parked aircraft, and support equipment. Their 50 caliber machine guns proved devastating against German aircraft caught on the ground during landing or takeoff operations. Captain Raymond Wetmore, flying P-51D Daddy's Girl, strafed Luftwaffe airfield at Oschersleben, destroying 6 Messerschmitt 109s parked near maintenance hangars and damaging fuel storage facilities that would require weeks to repair. His attack eliminated more German fighter aircraft than many successful air-to-air combats, while demonstrating operational flexibility that German single-engine fighters could not match. German aircraft, designed for specific mission profiles and optimized for individual performance characteristics, lacked the versatility that American designs incorporated as standard features. Messerschmitt 109s and Focke-Wulf 190s were effective air superiority fighters, but possessed limited ground attack capabilities and minimal operational flexibility for missions beyond their primary design requirement. The strategic bombing mission continued toward its targets despite the massive air battle, with B-17 formations maintaining formation integrity and bombing accuracy that achieved devastating results against German ball-bearing manufacturing facilities. The bombers' ability to complete their mission while under fighter attack demonstrated the effectiveness of American escort tactics and the futility of German interception attempts. Tanaka watched through his binoculars as the final German fighter formations withdrew from combat, their ammunition expended and fuel reserves critically low. The systematic destruction of Luftwaffe interceptor forces had been accomplished with clinical efficiency that demonstrated American air power maturity beyond anything Japanese intelligence had anticipated. The statistical summary of the engagement told a story that German aviation leadership could no longer deny or explain away. Luftwaffe units had lost 69 fighter aircraft, with 52 pilots killed or missing in action. These casualties represented months of irreplaceable training and combat experience eliminated in a single afternoon of combat against American opponents who lost 8 P-51 Mustangs and 6 pilots. The exchange ratio of nearly 9-to-1 in favor of American forces created attrition rates that German fighter aviation could not sustain regardless of aircraft production capacity or pilot training program. At current loss rates, the Luftwaffe would cease to exist as an effective fighting force within months rather than years. More devastating than immediate casualties was the psychological impact on surviving German pilots who had witnessed the systematic destruction of their most experienced colleagues by American opponents flying aircraft with seemingly unlimited performance advantages. The confidence and aggressive spirit that had characterized German fighter aviation since the beginning of the war had been systematically destroyed along with their aircraft and pilots. General Major Adolf Galland, receiving preliminary battle damage assessments at his headquarters, faced the grim reality that German fighter aviation had suffered catastrophic defeat that would reshape all future defensive planning. The carefully constructed mythology of German fighter superiority had been demolished by American opponents whose capabilities exceeded every intelligence estimate and tactical assumption. This represents more than tactical defeat, Galland would later write in his memoirs. American fighter aviation has achieved technological and tactical superiority that renders our current defensive concepts obsolete. We must fundamentally restructure our approach or face systematic elimination of our remaining air power. Galland's Seehord assessment proved prophetic as German fighter losses accelerated throughout the remainder of 1943 and into 1944. The combination of American technological superiority, systematic pilot training, and overwhelming industrial capacity created conditions that German aviation could not counter using existing resources and methods. For Tanaka, observing from his transport aircraft as the American bomber formations continued toward their targets with minimal losses, the implications were terrifying for Japanese military planning. If American fighter capabilities could systematically destroy elite German units flying advanced aircraft, what hope did Japanese aviation possess against the same opponents using aircraft and tactics designed for different combat environments? Japanese Fighter aircraft, optimized for Pacific theater conditions and emphasizing maneuverability over speed and firepower, would be even more vulnerable to American fighters than German aircraft had proven. Japanese pilot training, constrained by fuel shortages and limited aircraft availability, could not match American systematic programs that produced consistently competent pilots with standardized tactical skills. The industrial comparison was equally devastating. Japanese aircraft manufacturing, dependent on limited raw materials and increasingly disrupted by American bombing, could not match German production levels that were themselves inadequate against American industrial capacity. Japanese aviation would face even more severe disadvantages than German forces that had been systematically outproduced and outfought. The flight back to German-controlled airspace proceeded in silence as Tanaka contemplated the strategic implications of what he had witnessed. American air power had achieved levels of technological and tactical sophistication that neither German nor Japanese aviation could match using existing capabilities and resources. The return flight to German-controlled airspace provided Tanaka with time to analyze the devastating implications of American fighter superiority for Japanese military planning. His detailed notes, written in cipher during the flight, would eventually reach Imperial Navy headquarters in Tokyo, where they would trigger urgent reassessments of Japanese aviation capabilities and defensive strategies throughout the Pacific theater. The technical specifications that American P-51 Mustangs had demonstrated during combat exceeded Japanese intelligence estimates by margins that rendered existing tactical doctrine obsolete. The Packard Merlin engine's performance at high altitude surpassed anything Japanese industry had achieved or could realistically develop, given resource constraints and manufacturing limitations imposed by American strategic bombing campaigns. Japanese fighter aircraft, designed for Pacific theater operations where combat typically occurred at lower altitudes over shorter ranges, would be systematically outclassed by American fighters optimized for European conditions. The Mitsubishi A6M-0, still the backbone of Japanese naval aviation, possessed performance characteristics that had been decisively superior to early American fighters, but were now obsolete against current American aircraft. The Zero's maximum speed of 331 miles per hour at 14,930 feet compared unfavorably to the P-51D's 437 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. More critically, the Zero's lightweight construction and minimal armor protection advantages in early war combat against less capable opponents would prove fatal liabilities against American .50 caliber machine guns that had demonstrated devastating effectiveness against heavily armored German fighters. Captain Saburo Sakai, Japan's leading surviving ace with 64 confirmed victories, had submitted reports describing American fighter improvements that paralleled what Tanaka had observed over Germany. Sakai's combat encounters with F-6F Hellcats and F-4U Corsairs had revealed systematic American improvements in aircraft performance, pilot training, and tactical coordination that Japanese aviation could not match. American fighters have evolved beyond our ability to counter using existing aircraft and tactics, Sakai had reported to his superiors. Their systematic approach to pilot training produces consistent competence that exceeds our individual pilot development methods. More critically, their industrial capacity allows continuous improvement while maintaining overwhelming numerical superiority. Sakai's assessment, combined with Tanaka's observations of American capabilities against German opposition, painted a strategic picture that Japanese military leadership found difficult to accept. American aviation had achieved technological maturity and industrial capacity that neither Germany nor Japan could match, creating compound advantages that would prove decisive in sustained operation. The training methodologies that American fighter pilots demonstrated represented systematic institutional development that Japanese aviation had never achieved, despite producing individual pilots of exceptional skill and dedication. American Pilots arrived in combat units with standardized tactical knowledge and consistent gunnery skills that allowed immediate integration into existing operational systems. Japanese pilot training, severely constrained by fuel shortages and aircraft availability limitations, produced individual excellence but lacked the systematic consistency that American programs achieved. Japanese replacement pilots required extensive additional training after assignment to operational units, often learning critical skills through combat experience that American pilots acquired before their first missions. The fuel differential alone created strategic disadvantages that Japanese aviation could not overcome through tactical innovation or individual pilot skill. American aircraft operations consumed aviation fuel at rates that Japanese logistics systems could not sustain, while American pilots received unlimited training opportunities that Japanese fuel shortages made impossible to replicate. Lieutenant Commander Minoru Genda, architect of the Pearl Harbor attack plan and one of Japan's most capable aviation strategists, had reached conclusions that paralleled Tanaka's observations. Genda's analysis of American industrial capacity and aviation development predicted that Japanese numerical advantages would be systematically eliminated through attrition rates that favored American forces by margins too large to counter through tactical improvements. American aviation has achieved industrial maturity that transforms individual aircraft and pilot advantages into systematic superiority across all operational categories. Genda had written in classified assessments, Japanese aviation cannot match American production rates, training capacity, or technological development while simultaneously defending against attacks that consume our limited resources faster than they can be replaced. Genda's strategic assessment proved accurate, as Japanese aviation losses accelerated throughout 1943 and into 1944. The combination of American technological improvements, systematic pilot training, and overwhelming industrial capacity created attrition rates that Japanese aviation could not sustain, regardless of individual pilot skill or tactical innovation. The implications for Japanese defensive planning were catastrophic. If American fighters could systematically destroy elite German units flying advanced aircraft with experienced pilots, Japanese aviation would face even more severe disadvantages. Using aircraft designed for different combat conditions and pilots trained under resource constraints that limited their preparation for modern air combat. Tanaka's transport aircraft crossed into German-controlled airspace as darkness fell, ending his observation of American fighter capabilities that would reshape Japanese understanding of their strategic situation. The detailed intelligence he had gathered would reach Tokyo within days, triggering urgent conferences among Japanese military leadership who would be forced to confront the reality of American air power superiority. The statistical analysis that Tanaka would present to Imperial Navy headquarters told a story that Japanese leadership had been reluctant to acknowledge. American fighter aviation had achieved technological and tactical capabilities that exceeded Japanese aircraft performance by margins that could not be overcome through pilot skill or tactical innovation alone. Japanese aircraft manufacturing, already operating at maximum capacity while consuming resources that were becoming increasingly scarce due to American submarine warfare and strategic bombing, could not match American production rates that continued accelerating throughout 1943. American factories delivered completed fighter aircraft at rates that exceeded total Japanese aircraft production of all types combined. The pilot training comparison was equally devastating. American aviation training programs produced combat-ready pilots in systematic programs that Japanese fuel shortages and aircraft limitations made impossible to replicate. American replacement pilots arrived in combat units with flight time and gunnery experience that exceeded what most Japanese pilots accumulated during their entire careers. The technological gap would continue widening as American industrial capacity supported continuous aircraft development, while Japanese resources were increasingly devoted to maintaining existing production levels. American engineers could afford to design and test improved aircraft variants, while Japanese manufacturers struggled to maintain quality standards using substitute materials and inexperienced workers. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, facing the untold prospect of sustained combat against American opponents whose capabilities had systematically destroyed German air power, the strategic implications were clear and terrifying. The intelligence briefing that Tanaka would deliver to Imperial Navy headquarters represented more than tactical assessment. It constituted a strategic death sentence for Japanese aviation. The systematic destruction of German fighter forces by American P-51 Mustangs demonstrated technological and tactical superiority that Japanese aviation could not counter using existing aircraft, pilot training methods, or industrial capacity. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, commanding the combined fleet's carrier aviation, received Tanaka's preliminary report while his forces prepared for what would become the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Ozawa's reaction captured the desperation spreading through Japanese naval aviation as intelligence reports confirmed American capabilities that exceeded every defensive assumption Japanese military planning had incorporated. If American fighter performance has reached levels that can systematically destroy German aviation, our current aircraft are obsolete before they engage enemy forces, Ozawa transmitted to his subordinate commanders. We face opponents whose technological advantages render our tactical expertise and pilot dedication insufficient for achieving favorable combat outcomes. Ozawa's assessment proved prophetic during the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, when American F-6F Hellcats and F-4U Corsairs would destroy over 400 Japanese aircraft in a single day while suffering minimal losses. The tactical principles that Tanaka had observed during the Schweinfurt raid would be applied with devastating effectiveness against Japanese aviation using the same systematic approach that had eliminated German air power, the industrial mathematics. The terrified Japanese strategists became clear as intelligence analysts calculated American production capacity versus Japanese combat losses. American factories delivered approximately 2,300 fighter aircraft monthly, while Japanese production struggled to replace losses that were accelerating as pilot experience levels declined and aircraft quality deteriorated under resource constraints. Captain Mitsuo Fuchida, lead pilot of the Pearl Harbor attack and one of Japan's most experienced naval aviators, provided tactical analysis that complemented Tanaka's strategic observations. Fuchida's combat reports from recent engagements with American fighters confirmed systematic improvements in American pilot training, aircraft performance, and tactical coordination that Japanese aviation could not match. American pilots demonstrate consistent tactical competence that suggests training programs far superior to our methods, Fuchida reported. Their formation discipline, radio procedures, and coordinated attack patterns indicate systematic development that our individual excellence cannot counter when facing superior numbers flying better aircraft. Fuchida's assessment highlighted fundamental differences between American and Japanese aviation development that extended beyond aircraft specifications to encompass pilot training philosophy and tactical doctrine. American aviation had evolved into an integrated system that maximized collective effectiveness, while Japanese aviation remained dependent on individual pilot skill and aircraft performance. The fuel consumption comparison revealed strategic vulnerabilities that Japanese military leadership found impossible to address using available resources. American fighter operations consumed aviation fuel at rates that Japanese logistics systems could not sustain, while American training programs provided unlimited flight time that Japanese fuel shortages made impossible to replicate. Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Nishizawa, Japan's leading ace with 87 confirmed victories, had experienced American fighter improvements firsthand during recent combat over the Solomon Islands. His tactical reports described systematic American advantages that were becoming impossible to counter using existing Japanese aircraft and tactics. American fighters have achieved performance levels that exceed our ability to engage successfully, Nishizawa reported. Their aircraft possess superior speed, climb rate, and diving characteristics while maintaining fuel capacity for extended combat operations. More critically, their pilot training produces consistent gunnery accuracy that our individual development methods cannot match systematically. Nishizawa's combat experience, spanning nearly 3 years of continuous operations against increasingly capable American opponents, provided credible assessment of American improvements that intelligence reports had documented, but Japanese leadership had been reluctant to accept fully. The Zero fighter, once the symbol of Japanese aviation superiority and the foundation of early war victories, had become obsolete against American fighters whose capabilities exceeded Japanese aircraft by margins that pilot skill alone could not overcome. The A-6M's lightweight construction and minimal armor protection, advantages against early American fighters, were fatal liabilities against 50-caliber machine guns that had proven devastatingly effective against heavily armored German aircraft. Japanese aircraft development programs, constrained by resource limitations and competing military priorities, could not produce replacement aircraft with performance characteristics necessary to engage American fighters successfully. The experimental Tuum interceptors under development lacked the reliability and production potential required for systematic deployment against American forces whose numerical advantages continued growing. The strategic bombing campaign that American B-29 superfortresses would soon launch against Japanese industrial targets would further constrain Japanese aviation development while demonstrating American technological capabilities that exceeded anything German or Japanese engineers had achieved. The B-29's pressurized cabin, remote-controlled defensive armament, and 3,250-mile range represented quantum leaps in bomber technology that Japanese interceptor aircraft could not effectively counter. Captain Minoru Genda, observing American aviation development from his position as a senior naval air staff officer, reached conclusions that paralleled Tanaka's intelligence assessment. Genda's strategic analysis predicted that Japanese aviation would be systematically eliminated through attrition rates that favored American forces by margins too large to overcome through tactical innovation or individual pilot excellence. American aviation represents integrated industrial and military development that Japan cannot match using existing resources and methods, Genda reported in classified assessment. Their systematic approach to aircraft design, pilot training, and tactical development creates compound advantages that will prove decisive in sustained operations. Genda's prediction would prove accurate, as Japanese aviation losses accelerated throughout 1944 and into 1945. The systematic destruction of Japanese air power would follow the same pattern that American fighters had demonstrated against German aviation, using superior aircraft performance, systematic pilot training, and overwhelming numerical advantages to achieve decisive results. The intelligence that Tanaka had gathered over Germany represented more than tactical observation. It provided strategic warning of American capabilities that would systematically destroy Japanese aviation using the same methods that had eliminated German air power. The P-51 Mustang's demonstration of American technological maturity and industrial capacity foretold the systematic defeat of Japanese aviation by opponents whose advantages extended far beyond individual aircraft or pilot capabilities. For Japanese military leadership, facing the prospect of sustained combat against American air power that had achieved decisive superiority over German opposition, the strategic implications were clear, undeniable, and terrifying. The final assessment that Tanaka would present to Imperial Navy leadership contained conclusions that would reshape Japanese strategic planning for the remainder of the war. The systematic destruction of German fighter aviation by American P-51 Mustangs represented more than tactical victory. It demonstrated American industrial and technological maturity that neither German nor Japanese military power could effectively counter using existing capabilities and resources. The mathematical certainty of Japanese defeat became undeniable when intelligence analysts calculated the compound effects of American advantages in aircraft production, pilot training, fuel availability, and technological development. American aviation had achieved systematic superiority that would eliminate Japanese air power through attrition rates that Japanese industry and training programs could not sustain regardless of individual pilot skill or tactical innovation. Admiral Suemu Toyoda, assuming command of the combined fleet, received Tanaka's intelligence report while planning defensive operations that would become increasingly desperate as American capabilities continued improving. Toyoda's strategic assessment captured the hopelessness that Japanese military leadership faced when confronting American air power whose advantages extended across every operational category. American fighter aviation has achieved capabilities that render our defensive planning obsolete, Toyota reported to Imperial General Headquarters. Their systematic approach to aircraft development, pilot training, and tactical coordination creates advantages we cannot counter using existing resources. We face opponents whose industrial capacity supports continuous improvement while maintaining overwhelming numerical superiority. Toyota's conclusion that Japanese aviation was fundamentally outmatched by American opponents proved accurate during subsequent operations where Japanese losses reached catastrophic levels that could not be replaced through any realistic expansion of training or production program. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot would validate every assessment that Tanaka had derived from observing American fighter performance against German opposition. The fuel crisis that constrained all Japanese military operations became more acute as American submarine warfare systematically eliminated tanker shipping that supplied aviation fuel to combat units. Japanese pilots, already receiving minimal training due to fuel shortages, would face American opponents whose unlimited training opportunities produced consistent tactical competence that Japanese individual excellence could not match systematically. Captain Yasuhiko Kuroe, commanding air operations from carrier Zukaku, provided tactical assessment that confirmed Tanaka's strategic conclusions about American fighter superiority. Kuroe's combat experience against F-6F Hellcats during recent operations had revealed systematic American improvements that Japanese aviation could not counter using existing aircraft and tactics. American fighters demonstrate performance characteristics that exceed our aircraft capabilities by decisive margins, Kuro reported. Their systematic pilot training produces consistent gunnery accuracy and tactical coordination that our individual development methods cannot match. More critically, their industrial capacity allows continuous aircraft improvement while maintaining production rates we cannot approach. Kuroe's assessment, combined with Tanaka's observations of American capabilities against German aviation, provided comprehensive intelligence that Japanese military leadership could no longer ignore or rationalize away. American air power had achieved technological and tactical maturity that would systematically eliminate Japanese aviation through methods that had proven devastatingly effective against German opposition, the strategic bombing campaign that would soon devastate Japanese. Industrial capacity represented another dimension of American air power that German experience had foreshadowed. B-29 superfortresses, with capabilities that exceeded anything German or Japanese aviation had achieved, would demonstrate American technological superiority while systematically destroying Japanese war production. Lieutenant Commander Tadashi Nakajima, Japan's leading surviving carrier pilot, had reached conclusions about American aviation development that paralleled Tanaka's intelligence assessment. Nakajima's combat reports described systematic American advantages that were becoming impossible to counter through tactical innovation or individual pilot skill. American aviation represents integrated industrial development that Japan cannot match, Nakajima reported. Their aircraft possess superior performance in every measurable category, while their pilot training produces consistent tactical competence that exceeds our individual excellence when applied systematically against superior numbers. Nakajima's professional evaluation, based on extensive combat experience against increasingly capable American opponents, confirmed that Japanese aviation faced technological and numerical disadvantages that could not be overcome using existing resources and methods. The final intelligence summary that Tanaka compiled contained statistical analysis that told the complete story of American aviation superiority. American factories delivered fighter aircraft at rates exceeding total Japanese production of all aircraft types combined while maintaining quality standards that Japanese industry could not achieve using substitute materials and inexperienced workers. American pilot training programs produced combat-ready aviators with flight time and gunnery experience that exceeded what most Japanese pilots accumulated during their entire careers. American replacement pilots arrived in combat units with standardized tactical knowledge that allowed immediate operational effectiveness, while Japanese replacement pilots required extensive additional training that fuel shortages made increasingly impossible to provide. The technological gap would continue widening as American industrial capacity supported continuous aircraft development, while Japanese resources were increasingly devoted to maintaining existing production levels using materials and components of declining quality. American engineers could afford to design and test improved aircraft variants, while Japanese manufacturers struggled to maintain basic production using improvised substitutes for critical materials. 4. Imperial Japanese Navy aviation. The strategic implications were clear and devastating. American air power had achieved systematic superiority that would eliminate Japanese aviation through the same methods that had destroyed German fighter forces. The P-51 Mustangs' demonstration of American technological maturity and industrial capacity represented warning of capabilities that Japanese military power could not effectively counter. The systematic destruction of Japanese aviation would follow predictable patterns that Tanaka had observed during the Schweinfurt raid. American fighters would achieve decisive performance advantages while American pilots demonstrated tactical competence that exceeded Japanese individual excellence when applied through systematic training and coordinated operations. The compound effects of American industrial capacity, technological development, and systematic training would prove insurmountable for Japanese aviation forces already constrained by fuel shortages, material limitations, and declining pilot experience levels. The mathematical certainty of defeat that Tanaka's intelligence revealed would become tactical reality as Japanese air power was systematically eliminated by American opponents whose advantages extended far beyond individual aircraft or pilot capabilities. The horror that Japanese Flight Lieutenant Hiroshi Tanaka had witnessed over Germany on October 14, 1943, foretold the systematic destruction of Japanese aviation by American air power whose capabilities exceeded every assumption Japanese military planning had incorporated. The 400 German fighters destroyed that day by American P-51 Mustangs represented proof that American aviation had achieved decisive superiority that neither German nor Japanese military power could effectively counter using existing resources and methods.